1999, Morpheus offered Neo a choice between a red pill and a blue pill. In 2018, this country fractured between red and blue. In 2022, I'm here to tell you that if you really want the truth, more voters are neither red or blue. Yet, they have no representation, no choice, and no options. They have to choose between candidates chosen by the red people or the blue people. I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress as an American, as in red, white, and blue. I'm a veteran, an activist, and a small businessman. I'm asking you to join me in reminding the professional politicians in Congress who their bosses are. I support ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and a verified voter information system, all so we can stop having the best politicians money can buy. It's time to elect a veteran who will work for you, no matter what color they want to label you. Please go to electesrati.com and learn more. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Jurassic Park, you thought those little baby dinosaurs were cute until they turned into out-of-control carnivores. That's sort of what happens to government when we elect people based on very expensive advertising campaigns and propaganda. I'm David Esrati. I'm a veteran and a small businessman running for Congress. You don't want professional ad people and pollsters to sway your vote. All those hot-button issues like gun control, abortion, borders are all politicized to stop you from voting rationally. And thinking rationally seems to be in short supply these days. Most Americans have been voting against their own best self-interest for a long time because we've allowed money to buy our leaders. 1 million Americans died in the last 2 years because our leaders couldn't lead. It wasn't that hard. Mask, distance, test, and then vaccinate. In an instant, we had billions to spend on healthcare for COVID, when for years we've been told we can't provide healthcare for everyone equally in this country. That's an unintended consequence of the pandemic. If you think about it, our government can pretty much do whatever it wants, or what the people who buy our politicians tell our leaders to do. We also had a ton of money to prop up businesses. The next thing you know, it turns out that a living wage was not only possible, but necessary. As a small businessman who won't sell you out to corporate interests and lobbyists, I can tell you that it's time to fully understand the consequences of companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google and their effect on small business, and to remind you that small business is the #1 creator of jobs in this country. So this next election, don't trust this ad or any other political ad. Do your homework and think before you vote. It's time to put this ad man in Congress because I know that the best advertising is based on the truth, not the size of the budget or payola. Or you can just vote based on who has the money to buy their way into Congress and live with the consequences. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Hi, I'm David Esrati. I'm running for Congress, and unlike my opponent, Mike Turner, I actually want to talk to you, with you, every day that I'm in Congress. So I've been doing this at 4 o'clock every day. I hope that you get into the habit of tuning in and having conversation here. Today we're going to talk about citizen journalism. Why are we talking about citizen journalism? Well, there's been an awful lot of talk about mainstream media and their bias, and there's a lot of people that say they don't trust journalists, and yet who are we supposed to trust? How are we supposed to find things out? Where are we supposed to get insight? Where are we supposed to find out what's really going on? And for a lot of us, we don't have time to research. So we get stuff in our Facebook stream posted by friends and reposted, and a lot of it doesn't have a link to anything to verify it, and you have to go to Snopes or something else. And we share things that we don't really know are legit or not. That's not journalism. And it feeds on itself. And we get a community that's fearful, that is divided, that doesn't understand what's going on, doesn't know who to trust. So since 2005, which really started out as an experiment for me to test the limits and the usefulness of WordPress, which was a content management system that was open source at the time, that I was going to use for my business and for my clients, because I'd heard that it did really well with Google, with search, and it does. I started blogging at Esrati.com, and while people say, oh, he's a blogger, well, no, I'm the son of a journalist. And I believe in journalism, and I believe in journalistic integrity. It's why I've never been sued, although I've been threatened with a few lawsuits, mostly because people didn't like having the truth published about them. But the idea was to tell people what really goes on from someone who's involved and connected to the people in the community that are making the decisions. And over the years, I built up a reputation for honesty and integrity and not revealing my sources. So many of the stories that I've broken have depended on either somebody giving me a tip or just my curiosity. I'm a pretty curious guy. I try to figure things out. I try to learn about things. I've been that way my entire life. I think it probably stems from my father telling me to look everything up instead of giving me the answers. He constantly had me go in the dictionary or the library, encyclopedia, or reading books. So I would sit there and I would go and I would record videos and share them later on YouTube, and I built up this channel. And then I started creating actual news pieces. And, you know, it's funny, the very first story that I thought was pretty big happened before Ohio lost the last of its congressional seats before this round. And I found out that a whole bunch of employees from one of the Dayton Development Coalition's little darling companies, a company called Qbase, 17 employees had all given $1,000 on the exact same day to Steve Austria's campaign. And I looked, and, you know, other than the CEO, only one of these people had ever donated before. And it was $250. It was to a Democrat. This seemed awfully strange, but this is how corporations and deals go through. You donate, and then you get a little bit of pork slid your way. I wrote the story, and it was a year and a half later that the Dayton Daily News picked it up. But it was a story, all right. And unfortunately, nobody investigated, because campaign finance, really, nobody cares unless you really piss somebody off. Then they'll come after you. So that was my first, what I thought was a huge story, at least the first one that I could think back and really say was political and of national importance. But there have been others, and if you go to Esrati.com and you go to the must-read, you should see a bunch of them. In the category section, there's must-read, and I've tagged certain posts there. But the most bizarre story I've ever filmed and put together a research on, it cost me money. It cost me time of an employee doing research, putting together the video, digging through the records. We literally went through the Secretary of State's office in 49 states. I forget which state it was. One state doesn't let you do this publicly. And I think DC doesn't let you look at the voter records. So I went through all these records and dug it up and kept coming up with one thing after another and put the whole thing together and put it into a 4-minute video. And the reason I started doing this was because the behavior of the person at the center of all this just didn't fit with your normal local politician, especially a school board member. This is the story of Dr. Adil Baguirov, who was on the Dayton Public School Board, who ran unopposed. And it seemed really weird because he'd just come to town, and Joe Lacey actually said he encouraged Dr. B to run, and they became fast friends, and the two of them are supposedly the reason that they hired Ron DeCore instead of David Lawrence for superintendent, and who knows who else, but nobody's really talking because they're all embarrassed about the fact that they really never did their homework on Ron DeCore, who they later paid to go away. But Dr. Baguirov was like, it was like watching, I don't know, Sid Crosby from the Pittsburgh Penguins play with a mite team and not even hide the fact that he was a pro player. I mean, this guy was running circles around the rest of that board and manipulating them and talking to them and getting involved in things he had no business getting involved in. I remember him working on the bus deal and showing spreadsheets to everybody about the costs and the advantages of this. That's not supposed to be done by a board member. The board members aren't supposed to get involved in purchasing decisions. Same thing happened on the Chromebook deal. And I was on the IT committee there, and we had all these meetings. And it was never, a lot of the stuff really wasn't discussed. It was just all of a sudden we were doing this, and Baguirov was behind it. So we started digging in. And what we found was we had what we termed Adil Baguirov, the international man of mystery. And we created a 4-minute and 40-second video, and I'm going to play it for you right now so you can see it and understand what we did. The international man of mystery, Dr. Adil Baguirov. Back before CSI and Dragnet and even Color, the old gumshoe detective would be faced with a mysterious case.
It's a maze of conflicting clues. Any one of 7 people might have done it.
And if he just kept digging, in the end, the mystery would be solved.
Why did you kill him?
I didn't mean to kill him.
But you did, eh?
Ours starts with this $10,000 house at 630 Maryland Avenue. Who lives there? Who's registered to vote there? Who owns it? It's not very big. Only 1,300 square feet. And this doesn't look like the place you'd park your Jaguar with the blacked out chrome. According to voter registration records, it's the home of school board member Adil Baguirov. But what do we know about Dr. B? His father is a bigwig with Moscow Petroleum Club. Well, considering Adil got his PhD from the Moscow State Institute, the Russian part makes sense. And then he worked as executive vice president for lobbyist Stephen Payne at Worldwide Strategic Energy, after serving for several years as a special advisor on Russia in the former Soviet Union to Congressman Kurt Weldon, Republican.
You'll be destroyed,
who was investigated by the Justice
if a career
Department's
bureaucrat
Public Integrity
above you
Section
doesn't
for
like what
suspected
you're saying.
unlawful ties to 2 Russian companies and 2 Serbian citizens. His wife with the supermodel looks? Well, she's the daughter of the former Turkish ambassador to the United States. Are we to believe that she's living in this modest North Dayton house with her husband and 2 children? Because, whoa, checking those voter records, his roommate is also his business partner, Islam Shakbandarov. So Islam parks his Range Rover right next to the Jag in the grassy backyard, and 7 and his 2 kids live there too? Doesn't take the world's greatest detective to know that something doesn't add up here. The detective starts digging and finds business registrations to Dr. Baguirov and comes up with Metropolis LLC, which also owns another small property, 111 Cooper Place. This must be where Adil lives. It actually has a garage, and it's the address he used when he filed his one campaign finance report. But wait, checking real estate records, another Metropolis LLC bought another house. Oh, and did we mention that he failed to list either Metropolis LLC on his ethics statements, or the other 2 companies that are in either he or his wife's names, Millennium Medical and Montgomery Medical Holding? That's breaking some rules, but not as big as this rule. To be on the Dayton Board of Education, you have to live in the district. And that second house bought by Metropolis? Well, slight problem. It's in the Vandalia Butler School District. We can't even check the driveway because it's in a gated community. Oh, did I mention it's a $500,000 house? That's more fitting for our royalty with the Russian connections. Since November of 2015, before he became board president, he wasn't even eligible to be on the school board. And in the last election, he may have committed voter fraud. But guess what? While there's a lot of talk about the rules and regulations, there isn't anyone willing to do the investigation. The Board of Elections referred me to the State Ethics Commission, who referred me to the Secretary of State, who referred me back to the Board of Elections and the Prosecutor's Office, and I went to people I trust who work for the Dayton Public Schools, and you get the drill. Not my department. But since Dr. Baguirov has been so vocal in questioning why I questioned the deal to sell the Patterson Co-op site to CareSource, while he owns a company that depends on Medicaid dollars to survive and has a second undisclosed medical company, I'm guessing he has more to hide. And he has all the answers on the $10 million bus deal, and he buys trucks for his other business, from the same dealers. Well, you don't have to be the world's greatest detective to guess how this works. Word on the street has been for a while that Dr. Baguirov wants to run for State Rep Mike Henney's seat, and people wondered how he could do it if he lives in Dayton. Well, now you know. He doesn't. It's time for him to resign. It's time for an investigation into the purchasing decisions run through the board championed by Dr. Baguirov, from the Chromebooks to software to building sales and bus financing. And follow the money, because it's always about the money. So there you have it. 4 minutes and 40 seconds of video. There was a whole story posted at Esrati.com/man of mystery. And I published that, I think it was in April. And I contacted everybody and their mother. Nobody would do anything. Didn't matter that he committed voter fraud. Didn't matter about the contracts and the connections. Didn't matter that he didn't live in the district. Nobody cared. There was zero enforcement. However, around August of that year, somebody else was digging into a trove of information. And it was called the Azerbaijani Laundromat. And this is where the country of Azerbaijan was trying to do some reputation management for itself on the world stage, and was pouring billions of dollars into making things look like Azerbaijan is a wonderful place and we're great. Now, while Baguirov identifies as an Ahishka Turk, basically he's an Azerbaijani. And it turns out when these records got released in London and the Guardian published them all, somebody went through them who was an Armenian, and Armenians and Azerbaijans don't get along, and they saw this thing and they'd known about Baguirov, and they saw that, oh, wait a second. Baguirov got money because I had published the name Turbillion, which was the corporation that we sort of, one of the ones we discovered that wasn't really out there, and we next thing you know, the guy tells me Baguirov got $250,000 right after he got elected. And later on, it turns out it was because he was going to produce a movie about the most famous Azerbaijanis, the Nobel brothers, who invented dynamite. And he was going to have Brad Pitt in it. That whole deal went south, and there's currently a huge lawsuit in court trying to get the money back because he never came through and never performed. But there were other things that came up, like his trucking company was tied to loads being stolen and ransomed back, and purchases of equipment. Well, just the purchase of the Dayton public school buses, he was buying 10-year warranties on buses that had a 7-year lifespan. And the dealers make all the money on the warranty, not on the bus sale, because the bus sale purchases are regulated by the state. The whole thing kept getting stranger and stranger, and he didn't end up running for Mike Henney's seat, but he did run for, I think, county recorder, and lost. He spent an awful lot of money, especially with videos trying to, and SEO trying to bump my sites down to tell you his side of things. And now he's brokering ammunition made in Turkey and other third former Soviet republics over here in the United States, although I imagine that now that ammunition mostly is going to either Ukraine or Russia. The reality is we had somebody who was a foreign agent working here in Dayton, Ohio, elected and running our schools. When it came time for the November election and he had to change his voter registration so he could run for Henney's seat, I checked on the election date, and there it was. Said he was living in the Vandalia Butler School District at that big mansion. And I said, well, here's proof that he doesn't. And all of a sudden, the school board was, okay, since his voter registration says it. But they weren't going to do anything, so I threatened to file a mandamus action to get him removed if he didn't resign by noon the next day. He resigned at 11:30. 6 weeks short, or 7 weeks short of when his term would have been up. That's the power of citizen journalism. I've got a friend who I've known for, 33, 34 years. His name's Mike Weber. He's a local filmmaker. His first movie was one called Elephant in the Living Room. It was about people keeping wild animals as pets and the horrible outcomes. He followed that up with another movie, that really he worked with his daughter about body shaming by public schools. It's called The Student Body, where they were using BMI tests and telling kids about what they should and shouldn't do in terms of their weight. And then he came out with a new one, and that new movie basically was the end of so many people running the Columbus Zoo. It's called The Conservation Game. I hope to have Mike as a guest here, because Mike is no citizen journalist. That's not what he thinks of himself as. And even he produced, I think, 5 or 7 movies for Fox Searchlight Pictures, and then he did his own thing. But he ended up becoming a citizen journalist and exposing the Columbus Zoo for a whole bunch of things they shouldn't have been doing, with taking baby tigers on TV with Jack Hanna. Really interesting story. But citizen journalists make a difference. And you can't come back and say that I had any bias in this report on Baguirov or anything. I was staking my money, my reputation, my energies against somebody who obviously had a lot more connections and a lot more funding. It was David versus Goliath. The sad thing was David got no assistance at all. Baguirov's still out running around doing his thing, and we'll see how long that continues. The house out there in Vandalia has been sold, and now he's living somewhere around Westchester. There are stories to be told that the mainstream media just doesn't want to tell. Typically, if it bleeds, it leads. Or if it's involving, poor people doing stupid things, or people that are defenseless in the courts, they seem to like those. If it bleeds, it leads. But when it gets down to digging into things like public corruption, it's awfully hard for them to do it anymore because they just don't have the resources. And apparently, it's not sensational enough for making the headlines. I thought when I had the second pepper spraying of an inmate in restraints at the Montgomery County Jail, it would have been then to Phil Plummer. Instead, now he's probably going to be the next Speaker of the House. That has to change. We need some public accountability, and if we can't count on journalism and citizen journalists, the only thing left is your vote this November. And I stick to what I say on my bumper stickers. It's not vote for me. It's I want you to think before you vote. I want you to think about who's going to represent you, who's going to work for you, who's going to talk to you once elected. I haven't seen any comments or questions again, but if you got any questions after watching this, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I will answer tomorrow. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notify bell so you know every time we go live, you'll be able to see it. Tomorrow I plan on going and hearing Tim Ryan speak at 3 p.m. Hopefully I'll be back here in time for my 4 p.m. We'll find out. The idea of this is to get you interested in my campaign, interested in me, how I think, ask questions, and support this campaign. So if you need more information, go to electesrati.com and check things out. And if you want to read more of the Adil Baguirov International Man of Mystery story, it's at esrati.com/man of mystery. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you here tomorrow.